So today's guest is Sara West. Now, Sara is the mother of three. She spent 2 decades in recruiting and human resources for big tech companies. But when she found herself in a bitter custody battle, she saw so many things wrong with the family court system, and specifically how single mothers fared. So she decided to do something about it. She went to law school in her late 40s. And now at age 50, she is a newly minted attorney at a top law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina, where, in her words, she has the ability to bring her life experience and her empathy to the cases that she's handling. She believes it's never too late to reinvent yourself. Sara, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here because this is the literal transformation story. And we talked a little off mic that my mom did the same thing. She went to law school when she had young kids and she became a family lawyer. So I think that it is never too late, right?
It is never
To
too
make a
late.
change. And I love your story because a lot of women that I've interviewed, they see a problem, an unsolved problem, and they want to fix it. And this is kind of exactly what happened to you. You saw something that you thought, okay, I want to be involved in this. But let's back up a little bit with your origin story. You grew up in California,
Grew up in California.
and then you ended up in North Carolina at NC State University. So talk about how you kind of got off the ground with your first career.
Yeah, sure. So I did grow up in California, and I went to school in Northern California for 1 year, freshman year. And I really wasn't ready. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and you know how they say those are the rebellious types. So after my freshman year, I was teaching some swim camps on the East Coast in North Carolina. And I decided, you know what, I'm just not going to go back to school right now. I'm just going to stay here on the East Coast and work and figure out what I want to do. So that's what I did. And quickly realized, like, hey, I don't really want to work as a cook at Chili's the rest of my life.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, right?
There is nothing wrong with that, but you know, those jobs are very hard and you don't make a lot of money. And so that was really what motivated me to go back to school. And I pursued a degree in psychology. At NC State, they had a program called Human Resource Development through the psychology degree program. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That actually can translate to work post-graduation. And I got an internship at Cisco my last year of college. And then I got a full-time job there working kind of as an interview scheduling coordinator, entry-level job. And it just translated from there. And I spent most of my corporate career in the recruiting environment, specifically university recruiting, bringing college students into the company. And then the last couple years was more focused on like recruiting tools within those companies and supporting the what we call applicant tracking systems and that sort of thing. So that was the last few years of my corporate career. And those were great jobs. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you did have a great career and you were doing it for so long. You'd obviously gotten to a level of experience and probably a good level of pay and benefits. So what was the thing that made you say, okay, I'm going to turn this completely around and start over?
and that's kind of a complicated answer, but and you know, more than one reason. But as you mentioned, I went through some pretty contentious custody battles with my ex, and so that was a frustrating process. And I had a great attorney to begin with, and then I moved to a different attorney a number of years later when I had to, and that individual was not so great, and then I had to move one more time. I was like one of those people with multiple attorneys, and I recognize how important it is to have somebody to advocate for you and be able to explain the process, because most individuals don't understand the system and how it works and why things take so long or why a judge may decide certain things. So I think it was a little bit of frustration just with my personal experience and wanting to be an advocate for others potentially going through the same thing, and recognizing like you can't always use attorney speak because we're not a regular person's not going to necessarily
Right.
understand
You need
that.
to translate that
You
into
do.
layman's terms.
Yes.
And also there's a whole, I know from my mom being a family attorney, there's a whole emotional and psychological
There is.
component that is completely separate from the law
Yep.
that attorneys have to deal with.
Yeah, and so also my journey as well, I could reflect back and be like, maybe I didn't handle that the way I should have back then because I wasn't emotionally prepared to. So I think, again, my experience, I can help people in the same situation. Like, I understand why you're feeling that way, but it's not necessarily productive, and the law is not going to
Support you.
not necessarily care,
Right.
or it's not always fair. And so really you need to protect your peace, and you need to figure out how to move forward in a way that's healthy for you and not kind of hang on to some of the things that I guess, hurt you as a person.
Right. And I mean, navigating that is really complicated.
It is very complicated, and it does take a lot of time to get from A to B in certain places. But
Yeah, I mean, I remember my mom, obviously not breaching confidentiality, but like telling me about certain situations over the years that were really hard for her, personally.
Yep.
And now you have 3 children.
3 children.
And so, how old were you when you decided to go to law school?
I think I was 45. And so the second kind of reasoning for that was I was a little bit not challenged. And I mean, I had been doing what I had been doing for a long time. And when my kids were young, it was 100% okay for me to hit the easy button on the career. But I was pretty bored, and I knew I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want to be a director. I didn't want to climb that corporate ladder. And I also just kind of got tired of, when you start in a corporate world, you're definitely like drinking the Kool-Aid and go company. But I found after working in that environment so long, it was harder to
You didn't feel the same
that
way. Right.
Yeah, I'm like, because you live through layoffs, and it was just harder for me to sell to people like, yeah, you should come work here. So I just needed a change from that perspective. And I thought, well, my kids are getting older. They're more self-sufficient. What do I want to do when they're grown up and gone? And I need to make a decent living. And that's also in my thought process, like, where can you be a little bit older? And that's an asset. And so it kind of just led me to, you know what? I should try to go to law school.
And were you remarried at this point? I know you're remarried now.
No, I was not remarried, but I was dating my now husband at the time, and we did not live together at that time, but he was 100% my cheerleader in that. He, when I ran the idea by him, he's like, you should absolutely, try that.
And that really helps to have a partner that is supportive of you doing that. Now, did it take 3 years or did it take longer because you were still working?
Yeah, it took 4 years total. The first 3 years I did work and went to school part-time with doing summer school every year. And then when I got to that kind of third summer, I was like, if I'm really going to do this, I should probably get a job at a law firm this summer, and I should probably
get an internship.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly,
an internship,
exactly. Yeah. And so I was like, if I'm really going to commit to this, I need to
get some work experience.
I need to get some work experience. I probably just need to finish this thing full time the last 2 semesters and be done with it.
What were the obstacles, that you faced trying to continue to raise your family and going to school and working? I mean, that's a lot.
It was a lot. And like the first year was, I don't want to say the easiest because you're adjusting to being a student again, but the way that, and I went to Campbell, who offer a flex program, but you're in class with like the full-time students. There's not any separate class for part-time, but the way they organized the schedule was, okay, you were there 2 days a week from like 9 to 11:30. I was like, okay, I can do that. And my boss was very supportive at the time. She's like, just get your job done and go do what you need to do. So the first year, just scheduling wise, was manageable. And then at the end of that first year was COVID. And so we moved to Zoom. And then the second kind of year I was in school, they said, oh, you can go to Zoom class the whole time. And I'm like, well, that's what I'm going to do. That's going to be logistically easier. But the schedule itself wasn't tailored for part-time anymore. It was, you can be in class on Monday at 9 and then have to go back Tuesday at 2 or whatever.
So you had to figure out how to make that work with your job.
Yes. And I think about it, I'm like, COVID kind of benefited me in that way, because that would have been really hard to me to do in year 2.
Sure, absolutely.
And being able to do class via Zoom, like I didn't have to travel to school.
Right.
And I was working from home at the time, so it was just
kind of
easier.
worked out. Yeah, you were able to get it all done.
Yeah.
So you recently graduated, right? When did you
Graduated
graduate?
May 2023.
Okay. And you got a job. How hard
Got a
was it to
job.
get a job? I mean, when you were interviewing, were they asking you about your age and why you decided to make this career change?
Some of the interviewers did, yeah. And I was pretty forthright, like, hey, I went through my own experience. The company I'm working for now, they did not necessarily ask. I mean, they may have asked me that, but I don't
It
recall.
wasn't their focus.
No, that was not their focus. They were interested in, my grades and what classes I took, and I did a family law clinic through school, so I think that experience helped me. And I do think a lot of these law firms saw my age as an asset.
Right, they're looking at you as somebody that has life experience.
Exactly.
And that is probably really valuable in the courtroom, really valuable when you're working with clients.
Yeah, I
And
think it
obviously
is.
they can do math. They could look at your resume and figure
Yes,
out,
they can. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really interesting because one of the big things about this podcast is that we talk about women who are starting to not feel relevant in their careers or
Yep.
their workplace, especially in corporate America. Talking about downsizing, people getting too expensive,
Yep.
wanting to bring in, more youth, maybe people that they perceive have more energy or more creativity. And it's a really tough time for
It
women
is a tough
after a
time.
certain age. So what is it like being the junior the junior lawyer in a law firm at
Yeah.
50? I mean, what is that like?
I mean, it is it. I mean, the working part is fine. I think for me, the hardest part was okay. I really am starting over. So I did have a lot of like doubt. Why did I do this when I had this job? I worked from home. I made good money. I had unlimited vacation.
Right. You have no seniority. You're
I have no. I am like the
you're like two
lowliest
weeks
attorney.
2 weeks vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah, you gotta
And they
put in.
have like a requirement for billable hours, and so that definitely weighed on me in the first 3 or 4 months. I think I was just like, is this the right decision? And you
But
have a lot of imposter syndrome, and
sure, but I would also
yeah,
think it's really exciting to flex your brain in a new way.
yeah. And my husband reminds me, like when I have that kind of doubt, he's like, you're infinitely happier with what you're doing. Like you are challenged and you are using your brain every day and
And he
you're
can see
learning.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
he's
can
like,
see
you are
it.
not that happy in your other job. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, you just have to keep reminding me of that because yeah, I'm working my way up again. So
Yeah, I learned when I started this show and this business, I've learned more in the last 6 months than I've learned in 6 years.
yeah, that's how I feel too.
Yeah. And
Like
so it's
I'm learning
overwhelming.
more. I mean, I learned a lot in school, but as far as like in a work environment, I'm learning more than I had in, I don't know, 10 years probably.
That's great. And I know you're working for a great law firm, so that helps. So you probably have mentors and people that
Yeah.
can support you
Yes,
and
which is
guide
great.
you. Yeah. And I mean, what do you hope to do? What do you hope to accomplish? Because, obviously you're just starting, but you had
Yeah.
these dreams when you got into it. So what would your goal be?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, when I first started this, again, I was kind of like one step at a time because for me to think about changing my career was just overwhelming and all the things it would take to get to the point I am now. I was like, well, I'm just going to take the LSAT and I'm just going to get through the first semester. And I
Kind of
really,
like one step at a time.
and that was really the only way I could manage it without feeling kind of overwhelmed about. And when I was, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to, like, that was really the most pivotal point for me. Like, okay, I've been dipping my toes in this
But
long.
I'm really going to do it.
I'm really going to jump in and make the leap and do it. And I think once you do that, you're in it. And I envisioned myself kind of working at a smaller law firm, and here I am kind of working at a larger law firm. Long term, I'm like, maybe I'll stay where I am and work to be a partner there. That seems like a good
Well,
gig to
and they're
have.
right, and they're very well known and very
Yeah.
prestigious, so that's a
Yeah.
good place to be. So, this is a podcast about transformation. It's
Yeah.
about women, and a lot of women feeling irrelevant, unseen, that they're just not valued after a certain age. So, what kind of advice would you give someone else who says, I'm in this spot where I don't know what the next chapter is, and I'm afraid to take a leap, but, I'm not happy, or my company's downsized me?
Right.
What kind of advice would you have for women?
I mean, I think that Women would really have to consider like where their passions are, what are their interests, what make them thrive, like, and then again, maybe just step by step think about how to get to that place, and before 4 years passes and you're where you wanted to be. But you don't want to necessarily choose something that you're going to feel flat. You want to be inspired, so give
Yeah.
it some thought about, okay, what makes me happy.
I know. I've heard some people, the advice is, okay, think about times in your life when you're happy
Yep.
and look at those moments and then figure out, okay, what elements are there that maybe would translate to a job or a career.
Right.
And then also think about your skill set because you need to match that.
You do. Yeah,
You
you
can't
do.
just be, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a ballet dancer. I want to be president.
Yes, things that are achievable.
Things
for
that
sure.
are achievable,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's really exciting, and I think that a lot of women could be, inspired to do something like this. Maybe not go to law school, but whatever it is,
Yeah, going back to school.
something that
Definitely
they've
an
always
option.
wanted to do,
Yep.
and just pursue it, just go for it, and like
Yep.
you said, kind of map it out in steps.
Yeah.
So obviously you've taken on this really big thing, but do you have a bucket list of things in life that you'd still like to do? Maybe not necessarily career-wise, but just in general.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd like to travel and spend more time with my kids as they grow into adults. Those are kind of the big things that I envision doing in the future.
How old are your kids now?
My oldest is 21 and my middle is 19 and my youngest is 16.
So you're still in it,
Still in it.
but
The end is in sight.
but there's light. There's
Yes,
light,
yes.
right, at the end of the tunnel. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for spending time with me today and
Yeah, of
sharing your
course.
story, because I feel like other people could really benefit from this, other women, and whether it's the law or whether it's something else,
Right.
see that there's an opportunity there to make a change.
Yeah. And I don't think that we as women give ourselves enough credit. I think that we really do carry a lot of things and we accomplish a lot of things, and some of the time we just don't really take the time to reflect at all we've accomplished and give ourselves credit for that.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, too, a lot of women say, well, I don't have the skill set. And then you look at what she's been doing, managing a house, managing a lot of kids' lives,
Right.
all the things that a lot of women balance every single day.
Yep.
And they balance that with work and school and all and whatever, volunteer work, all these other things, they're managing it.
Exactly.
So I think women do not necessarily realize how much potential they have.
I agree.
So anyway, well, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, of course.
I really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
it. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
Okay. Yeah.